Midnight. My heel drags over chapel stone. The door refuses to yield. Each shove exhales a ribbon of absence that swallows breath. The bronze bell shudders, and its clang dies inside the stillness, as if the town is holding its ears. Dust motes freeze mid-fall. My pulse feels like asphalt cracking. Something is wrong. Here, silence is weight, not peace. Why does the silence snap shut the bell? Nightly, the chapel rehearses its own choreography. I press my shoulder into the oaken door, in the groove carved before me. The familiar scrape of stone on stone follows each shove, while my breath curls in thin clouds. The lantern beside the door warms old plaster, its wick trimmed after vespertide so it never sputters. Beyond the threshold, the pews have been swept twice since dusk. The sexton's broom leans against the wall, bristles crisp with lavender dust from Sunday service. I tap the bronze bell, not warning but habit. Its rim worn smooth by years of iron and salt air, rope looped through a hook polished by custodians. Everyone nods, a quick shift in the square as they pass. Tavern whispers, "Keep the legend alive." How the bell snaps shut mid-clang, and the old women still point to the crack while drawing water. Tonight's silence is heavy but the same that hangs over the square at midnight, steady, familiar, bound to our watchful town's rhythm. The chapel door groans less than it once did, not because the hinges softened, but because the town leans on a new silence. I push it open with both hands. The lock complains like a throat after drought. A gust of damp air rolls down the nave and takes the wick of the lantern I carry. I plant it on the altar rail, set my notebook beside it, and run my fingers over the first blank page until the candlelight steadies. Stone still cool from the day. Pews glow pale where lamplight hits. Deacon Lyle steps in behind me, boots a whisper on flagstones. He lingers near the narthex, hand on the carved pillar, watching the dark corners. "If it's only wind," he murmurs. "We should close up before folk hear." "I'm not here for whispers," I reply, flipping open the notebook. My pen clicks once, deliberately, so I don't lose rhythm. I'm here to write what I hear. I draw a short line under the heading, letting nerves travel to my fingertips. This is the first testimony of the wordless hymns rising from this chapel each night. The words look raw. I trace them twice, then press the nib into the empty space below. The moment stretches. Lyle shifts his weight, his breathing counterpoint to the stillness. The organ stops groaning. The chapel fills with waiting, heat gathering along the backs of my knees. A hum begins, one note at a time, soft as cloth over the floor. I raise the lantern. The flame trembles like a thought held too long. The hum climbs. The hairs at my neck stiffen. No words, only tones weaving through the stone ribs and spilling down the aisle. I lay my palm flat on the page, keep the pen steady, and let the sound carry my hand. I write. No syllable, no tongue. Long, steady breath where the choir should be. The light in the window trembles with it. Mara from the bakery, apron chalked with flour, eyes wide as if something perched above the pipes, steps in. "It's not just you," she whispers, raising a small lantern. The hymn takes on an edge, a shimmer like nails on glass. The sound swells again, tension snapping through me like wire. Lyle's shoulders hunch, jaw working. "We don't need a crowd," he hisses but stays. The hymn presses harder, thick enough to knock breath from my chest. Mara drops to her knees beside the pew, fingers clutching rough wood, lips moving though no words come. The note drags on. I lean forward, pen scratching the next line. It leans toward us but retreats when we hold our breath. I can feel the music settle on Mara's shoulders, not harsh, almost hand-like. Yet it doesn't fall, just hovers. When the sound finally eases, The nave air is raw, as if someone slammed a heavy door. Mara lifts her face, lips trembling. "Every night," she says, voice cracking. "It gathers at the roof and spills down like rain, even when I sat in the alley with my back to it last week." Lyle's gaze darts between us. His calm fractures now that he has heard it and cannot call it silence. He steps forward, presses his thumb against the ink. "Write what you can," he says tightly, "and put it somewhere the town can read it." I nod, the pressure giving way like steam. I write the closing line with a hand shaking, not from fear, but from the hymn's echo. This is the first testimony recorded by daylight, bearing witness to every night's rise of the wordless hymn. Mara touches the margin, confirming with her tremor. The candle gutters as we leave, but I set the notebook on the altar, leaving it open for anyone daring to see the truth forming there. The bell in the chapel tower still vibrates when we push open the door. Mara drops her satchel on the pew and heads straight for the side table, flipping through the visitor logs. I keep my fingers on the recorder, ready for any scrape or whisper that slips between hymn notes. Deacon Lyle waits by the lectern, eyes on the stained glass sunburst, as if it will point toward whatever wakes the songs. Tonight was the third time in a row, Mara says without looking up, slamming a journal shut, then opening the town ledger from the library, its brown spine cracked. The first hymn started the night the mill burned in '63. Yesterday's matched the drowning in the creek. She taps the page. These anniversaries are marked in every margin. Lyle grabs a candle, thumbs the wick, and the flame flares, dragging shadows across the ledger. If the hymns appear only on those dates, the chapel isn't the origin, he mutters, scanning columns. It's a clock. I copy the entries onto scrap paper. Date, tragedy, trembling margin notes from townsfolk who once swore they heard voices above the bell tower. Flood, illness, fire align with the current calendar. My pen stutters as the candle flickers. The cadence from the chapel swells outside, muffled but steady, reminding me the mystery is awake. Mara stands, pushes the chair back. We can't keep hearing the hymns and act like they mean nothing. She shoves the ledger toward me. Take this down. Every anniversary from now on, we watch the chapel. As we cross the yard, Lyle repositions the gate latch, eyes on Mara. If this ties us to those tragedies, he whispers, we're tethered to whatever caused them. His jaw tightens. No one wanders inside alone anymore. The hymn swells outside again, tone higher, pressing against windows. The wind snags the ivy on the wall, humming in rhythm. I plant my recorder on the stone step, feel the vibration through my boots. In the distance, a villager pauses on the road, fingers curling around the fence, face up-tilted as the hymn hits another peak. Mara places a hand on my shoulder, not for comfort, but to steady me. She points past the gate. 2 lanterns burn toward the library. A pair of town hall apprentices rush toward us with fresh ledgers. They heard the hymns last night, too, Mara says sharply. And they brought every page with dates. We file into the chapel again, repeating the motion, but now armed with days and tragedies. The hymns swirl louder. My recorder catches the pitch when the bell tower chimes 8. Candlelight dances along walls, casting long fingers toward the parchment. Payoff. The hymns appear on those calendared nights, tied to recorded tragedies. The truth isn't whole yet, but we now have a map. The next anniversary is circled in ink. Deacon Lyle exhales and closes the gate. We mark the next date, he says, and we're here every night leading up to it. No more pretending we don't hear them, Mara says. My recorder clicks off as the hymn fades, but the ache in the stone lingers. The chapel remains, humming quietly, a tether waiting for the next anniversary. The chapel door clung to its hinges until Mara leaned against it. The latch squealed, and the charged hush rolled out. The folklore murmured, "Don't name your sins in there, the walls listen," was no longer just a story. It sat in the air like breath holding back a storm, every footstep pinging off stone like a heartbeat. Deacon Lyle set his palm flat against the nave's carved column, eyes half closed, feeling the silence burn his fingertips. Mara pulls the ledger from her satchel and spreads it over the altar. Candle wax dripped into margins, anniversaries scrawled in Lyle's precise hand. She slides a finger down a column of dates and names, fingers trembling before tapping the page. "Tonight matches the mill fire," she whispers, voice punctured by the hush. I click my pen. The scrape sounds obscene. The notebook is open to the hymn's notation, our first recorded testimony. I scribble. Silence responds best when we push against it. Deacon Lyle crouches and draws a circle in dust on the floor, as though charting a field. "Say something," he murmurs, then stops. He doesn't need me to explain why. Mara straightens, takes a breath that turns to tremor, and steps toward the center. She begins, then clamps her mouth shut as the silence thickens, cold fingers wrapping her throat. The draft skims the pews, candle flames bow to one side. Her lips part again, syllables wobbling, and she forces out, "I kept watch but let them go without blessings." The air tightens like a vice, the silence pushing back aware of every word aimed at it. We'll sit again, try another approach. Maybe start light to test pressure before guilt shows up. I click my pen shut. The metal catch rings in the hush. The chapel doesn't answer, but the charged quiet waits, patient and undeniable. Folklore rooted in it, daring us to give it words. I walk toward the door. The silence trails like smoke. The payoff settles. We now know the charged hush tightens with confessions, but doesn't break, a measurable reaction to use. Mara follows, trailing fingers along pews, and the chapel holds us in breathless quiet, refusing to let the past sleep. The chapel doors swing on hinges that remember every prayer. Lanterns line the nave, casting long amber shapes across hymnals stacked on the pews. Deacon Lyle stands at the front, notebook in hand, ledger pages fluttering from the draft. Mara sits on the third pew, fingers tight around the rail, chin lifted. Around her, 5 townsfolk drift in. Jeremiah the mason, Lisa the baker, old Ruth, and the mill twins. Each step crunches on scattered ash from the day's bonfires. "We heard it again," Lyle says, pulling the hush close. Not silence anymore. The hush repeats what we bury. Tonight, we stop letting it listen alone. Speak, and let whatever answers come back to us, not just the stone. The bell in the tower knocks once, as if agreeing. Mara stands first, though the memory of her throat locking in the hush still vibrates. "I told the dark I did nothing when the river claimed the wagon," she admits. It echoed 3 words, but the chapel bent them back like a mirror. I'm back because that echo was louder than my fear. Jeremiah shifts. "You said it for me," he hisses, pointing at Mara. "I heard it, but I won't have you carry mine." Mara's shoulders tense. "Then say yours," she counters, breathing the chapel's chill. He slams his palm on the pew. The board creaks. "I let the scaffold rot. Someone slipped in winter. My tools were dry, but I saved them for the council's stonework. The hush swallowed that confession before, but tonight the chapel threw it back up twice." Lisa steps forward, flower dust trailing. "I heard the hymn again on Tuesday," she says, eyes on the lintel. It matched the day the miller's boy ran off. I told the hush a lie, blaming fog for ruined grain. The echo didn't repeat the lie. It repeated what I did, taking the boys' ration money to pay rent. The chapel, not me, kept the ledger honest. Tension coils around the pews. Ruth drops her basket. Apples scatter like red notes. It isn't just confessions anymore, she whispers, voice shaking. It's the hush letting us hear guilt we tried to hide. We can't pretend the past is buried, not with these echoes naming us. A breath of wind stirs the hymnals. Chipped glass trembles. Lyle steps forward, reaching for Mara's hand, then letting it fall. Then we give the hush new words, he says, voice low but steady. We meet every anniversary, bring the ledger, and name what the chapel repeats. We don't let it accuse alone. We join it. Jeremiah nods. The anger softens into something workable. No more pretending. I'll bring the scaffold plans and set the posts straight this week. Lisa gestures toward the door. I'll keep the pantry books transparent. No more quiet rationing. Ruth gathers the apples, pressing them back into her basket. The twins pick up a candle and place it near the altar, flame steady against the draft. Lyle reaches for Mara's notebook, opens it to a fresh page, handwriting steady. The chapel seems to exhale. The hush remains, but the townsfolk now speak into it, and it answers not with ghosts, but with the words they finally release. Each confession lands like a stone returning to the bottom of a well. The echo proves the chapel has always held the truth, waiting for them to step into it. Wind refuses to stir around the chapel, so silence sits like a person in the doorway. Weighty, expectant, people arrive in pairs, some dragging boots across gravel, as if they could scrape the hush free. Mara unrolls the ledger on the stone table outside, tracing her finger down a column still glowing from last night's candle. Anniversary of the well collapse, she says, then lifts her head toward the open nave. The hymn on the 7th line started right after we stopped sending water, she adds, voice shaking but not quiet. Lyle leans over her shoulder, the hymn notes memory fresh. He nudges the ledger, matching dates with the ribbon markers tied in the morning. We're not waiting for another night, he says. The key ring hitting his palm rings louder than the silence. Tonight, we ring the bell before stepping inside. Let the chapel hear us fighting the hush instead of whispering. He points to the twins, shifting between columns, carrying planks for the leaning entryway. Mara, Lisa, the confession list. Read the next name at the threshold. The silence tightens because someone is holding back. We stop that now. Inside, Ruth stands by the pew, her back to the altar, jaw clenched, fingers hammering the hymn book cover. I'm tired of the chapel singing about the ration ledger, she shouts, and the hush reacts. Pressure on her ears, as if the chapel leans close. Lisa snatches the ledger from Mara's hands, thrusting it toward Ruth. You signed the ration cut. Lisa spits. You told the twins to take extra flour because you didn't want the council to blame you. Silence swells so loud it becomes physical, pushing Ruth forward. She opens her mouth. The chapel inhale rattles the candle flames. When she speaks, her voice cracks. I stamped the ledger with the twins' names. The chapel responds by dropping a single condensation drop from a stone arch onto the floor, a patient drip matching a heartbeat. The twins step forward, palms brushing the wet stone before the drip hits the floor. One lifts the bell rope, the other drags the plank beside the altar. If the chapel demands confrontation, the older twin says, we give it confession and rebuilding both. Mara nods, then grabs charcoal and marks her name beside Ruth's entry. I listed the families we lied to about the repair schedule, she whispers. And the silence, momentarily satisfied, eases as their breath returns to normal. The bell rings once, bright and shattering. The hush cracks, but doesn't shatter. And the hymn from last night threads through the clearing air, looping like a warning. Outside, Lyle hands out slips of paper with dates scrawled on them. "Next vigil we're here before sunrise," he says, "and we'll fill every blank ledger with what we owe." The twins haul the scaffold to the cracked doorway, and Ruth lifts a bucket of mortar with trembling arms, depositing it beside the steps. No one pretends the chapel will ease, but they are done pretending they can step away. The silence hasn't loosened. It's waiting for their next move. They do not leave the ground unbroken. The hymn rose again before sunrise touched the stained glass, a swelling without syllables filling the rafters and glowing the pulpit an impossible blue. The air thickened, pressing against lungs like a hand. The silence that followed was no absence, but a living shape between us and the stone. It hovered around Mara's shoulders, braided with dust motes over the ledger as if it wanted to read the names. The boundary between us and whatever waited in the corners bled away. Ruth reached for the altar rail, and where her fingers met the wood, the hymn's glow braided with something translucent that moved with hers. Deacon Lyle did not flinch. He lifted the date slip Mara had written, October 17th, the mill fire anniversary, and stamped it with ink. "We start with this," he said, breath short enough to reveal the hymn's heartbeat. "And we stay before the bell and after the hymn." He gave the slip to Lysa, who clutched it like a shield, then pointed toward the ledger on the kneeling bench. "Each name now gets a ledger line. The hymn answers names, not titles. We match it." Lisa set the slip beside the ledger. I slid my quill over the page. The ink clotted over the hymn's cadence, and the silence leaned so close I could see my reflection in the pulpit lamp. Only the reflection layered with someone older, gloved, shoulder pressed against the same post. The twins were half inside. Scaffolding ladders braced against the stone when the hymn flexed into a peak. Ari stopped mid-climb, footsteps frozen on a rung. The silence narrowed into a tunnel around their throat. "Let the hymn finish," Mara whispered, voice trembling, but she held the ledger. The hymn crescendoed, the pulpit light flaring, and their faces turned to vapor for a heartbeat. Thin, pale, then solid again. "It's not harmless," Ruth said loudly, more to the air, and the hymn answered with a low note vibrating the bolts. The moment pushed past tension when Jeremiah stepped into the aisle with a loam-stained lantern. He planted it by the center pew and set a bundle of confession slips beside it, each naming a specific omission. Hidden rations, unreported structures. He did not seek forgiveness. He placed them in the lantern's light and said, "We keep it in the light, or it takes the light back." The hymn swelled. The silence seemed to taste the slips, easing only when he laid his palm flat over the glass. Mara followed, nailing her slip near Jeremiah's. The hammer rang through the chapel like a small bell. After the hymn subsided, the silence hung thick but no longer choking. Mara stepped into the light, her shadow merging with a faint outline beside the altar rail. She leaned toward Ruth, pressing her forehead against Ruth's shoulder. Their breaths mingled without words. "We stay before the bell," she said, steady now. "And we bring the town with us." Lyle nodded and passed around fresh slips for the next week. Each person took one, marked a date, tucked it into their folds. The hymn had shown us the chapel could not be dismissed, and the town's pretense cracked with each inked name and nailed slip. The silence remained palpable, a presence between the living and restless. And we met it side by side. The chapel stood with its door ajar, scaffolding reaching like cautious ribs beneath the bell, twins frozen as the hush fell heavy again. The hymn that had risen with no name loosened once more, not sung but breathed, and the silence that followed tightened like a hand on a throat. Ruth stepped back, her accusation still hanging weightlessly, and Mara bent to place her name beside Ruth's on a small card pressed into the stone sill. Jeremiah's lantern puddle held the slips he gathered, edges trembling where the candle licked them. Lyle lifted one more from a velvet pouch, a pale promise of dawn vigils yet to come, murmuring lighter words as if coaxing a reluctant friend. The townsfolk stayed, faces lit by low flames, each confession laid bare, each lash of guilt a tether nailed to the chapel's frame. Outside, the town did not attempt to forget. They stood mute, bearing witness. While within the chapel's silence, the spirits' bound hymns settled over every roof and road, and no one could pretend again that they had never heard.